Hello and welcome to Susegad Stories from Goa. I'm your host, Clyde D'Souza. I'm a 3-time published author, media professional, and a Goan who loves everything about Goa. My latest book is called Susegad, The Goan Art of Contentment. In my podcast, I chat with some famous and some of my favorite Goans, and together we explore Goa beyond its beaches. From Feni to Fado, Casa to Cashews, come discover Goa like you've never done before. Today, we're going to talk about my favorite topic, which is the sun, the sea, the sand. Yes, Goa's magic formula is what many Goans love and probably every tourist loves. But more importantly, is Goa's sea in danger? In this episode of Susegad Stories from Goa podcast, we will wade into Goa's waters and find out what's wrong and what we can do about it. My guest today is a young activist, Sarita Fernandes. She's a research fellow and specializes in coastal policy. She has worked with the Goa Forest Department as founder of Morjim Sea Turtle Trust and is also the founder of the Ocean Network. And she will be representing India at the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon. Wow. Welcome to the Susegad Stories from Goa podcast, Sarita.
Thank you so much, Clyde.
It's really nice to have you. And can you just quickly tell our audiences, everyone who's listening from across India and across the world, where in Goa are you actually from?
So I'm actually from Shinshini in Margao, and I actually live there and have my grandparents' home over there. So I am from Shinshini, and I also lived for a long portion of my work life in Morjim, which was where my relatives lived, and much of my work in sea turtles and the ocean that you just mentioned happened over there.
Wow. What's the closest beach to you in Margao?
So it's Varka.
Okay.
Varka is the closest to where I live. And in Morjim, obviously, it was Morjim and Mandram Beach.
Right. Yeah. So we've got a lot to talk about: beaches, turtles, but let's talk about the sea at first. And that's a personal enjoyment and love of mine. I mean, I used to love to, jump into the Goa's warm waters, as all kids do. I love the beach. And obviously, those are for very pure, selfish reasons, for self-enjoyment. But you've made it your life mission, which is honestly amazing. So I just want to ask you on a lighter note, like, do you like the beach? Do you like going to the beach? Do you like swimming in the waters? Or what's your favorite beach-related activity, if you don't mind telling me?
Oh, I really do love the beach. It is a safe space, to be very honest. I think for all of humanity, because we technically came from the sea, in terms of evolution. My favorite activity, although, is snorkeling. I really love taking my snorkel gear and just being in the safety net of not very deep water, but being able to see what's underwater at the same time. Rather than diving, which is taking a tank and going quite deep.
So did you always feel that you were, drawn to this side of the beach, as in being an activist? Did you want to start organizations that kind of conserve the ocean? What kind of was your trigger?
Not at all, in fact, Clyde. I actually got into the space quite accidentally, and I can say a little bit out of laziness. So I did my master's in public policy from Xavier's. So it was a very small class and a very difficult course to get through. And they were very strict that everybody who comes in the class should already have their subject of thesis planned in mind. And I was just, clueless as to what should I do? What should I select as a subject of my thesis? And the closest thing I think I could think of when the submission date kept nearing was the sea. So I chose the coastal policy of India, which is the CRZ, as my subject of thesis.
Okay, so basically the CRZ is the Coastal Regulation Zone, right?
Yes.
That's amazing. And so after your thesis, you founded 2 organizations, right?
Yep.
So you want to just throw a little bit of light on what these 2 organizations are and what do they do?
Yes. So I actually worked for a while after my thesis. I worked in Bombay and I worked in Delhi. It was in February of 2020 when we just finished a project on sea turtle awareness. I think a lot of people who were in Goa in 2019 during that season may remember something called the Morjim Sea Turtle Festival. That was a project we were running, and it was a very successful program. And then March happened. And the moment the COVID-19 lockdown was announced, the program was shut down basically in Goa, and I was asked to report back to the Bombay office from home. So I had two choices: leave home, go back to Bombay, and work out of an uncertain terrain in a lockdown, or stay in Goa and continue the work through whatever means I could. And I chose the second one. I resigned, and I applied for a grant, and I was very unsure that we would even get this grant. And we got the grant to set up a sea turtle trust, basically. They said, let's set up a sea turtle trust rather than a program, so that it's much more long term and sustainable for the geography for Goa itself. And we set up the Morjim Sea Turtle Trust during the first lockdown in July 2020.
So the first thing was the Sea Turtles Trust, and then tell us a little bit about the Ocean Network as well.
So it was actually the Ocean Network that was formed very informally during the lockdown. It was called Kapan back then, the Coastal and Marine Policy Advocacy Network. It was actually a WhatsApp group with all of us stuck in different field locations. Some of my friends, relatives, were stuck in the middle of the sea, like they were sailors and everything. And we were just trying to make sure everyone is okay. Everybody has food to eat. Everybody has access to, basic resources to sustain till some clarity comes through.
Okay.
And we were just trying to stay put. So people from the conservation space, the fishery space, shipping space, everybody, the dev sector, the development sector, some government officials also, we were all just huddled together digitally and just making sure that we are okay. And these are the same people who don't talk to each other on a normal day. Like, it works completely in silos.
Okay. So now the other thing about India is that it has 7,500 kilometers of coast. And Goa just makes Goa is the smallest state in India, and obviously it has the smallest coastline also, I think, about 103 kilometers. But I think most of the coastline is used for all kinds of activities, right? It's, of course, a beach lover's paradise. And everything from fishing to beach tourism, everything's happening over there, right? So I think it's apt and maybe great that, someone like you, a Goan, has chosen to kind of, become the flag bearer of this. So what can you just tell us quickly? We all love the sea. We all love going, sitting over there on the beach shack, having a beer, swimming in it, jet skiing. But what's the kind of impact that it's having on Goa's coast, and why should we be worried? What's going to happen? Actually.
Goa actually had an amazing tourism, model. I can say it had a very unique model right from the 70s, and it was on the principle of what your podcast is called, Susegad. We would, you come to the beach and you just relax, and, you just let your mind and body do its thing, with forming a relationship with whatever you want to do on the beach, swim, dance, sleep. Whatever you want to do.
Right.
What has happened, especially in the last 2 decades or last 3 decades, I can say, is that we sort of adopted models that we've seen in other parts of the world. So, say, for example, Bangkok or Thailand or, other places around Southeast Asia. And we've tried adopting those models, thinking that it was a revenue generating, option. So basically, we introduced jet skis. We wanted to have those waterfront spaces like Bali, and we wanted to have everything that Hawaii and say LA was doing. And obviously, a lot of that was not possible in Goa because of the activism by the fisherfolk and the citizens over there who were just like, this is not sustainable for Goa. And also tourists who, you have a very good group of tourists who really want the Susegado, the paradise feel of the beaches that Goa does provide. So the impact of this has been quite magnum, where even the government has released the beach carrying capacity reports, the government of Goa, on how much can the beaches take in terms of the activities that are being done via the tourism sector.
Right. So
And I think
is that way above the limit? For example, let's say if the beach capacity carrying capacity is 100, then it's like what is it now? Is it like 200, 300? It's like what? It's crazy levels.
so. Hypothetically, if it's 100, Goa's beach carrying capacity is 10,000. Like
Wow.
if it's yeah, so that's the footfall you see each season, and it's just increasing by the day because the operators, the government, or the tourists do not have any framework or any way to understand how do we do this a little more sustainably. There's just
Right.
a lot of demand and a very little option of supply to this
Right.
demand that
Yeah,
Goa
from
can
what I
give.
understand, that there is a coastal regulation policy that says that you should not erect any permanent structures within 200 meters of a coast, right? But obviously that's being flouted in places like Kandulim and Morjim, which is more north, and it's seeing this hyper growth, right? So when someone does that, when they do these permanent structures or when there is jet skiing, what is the actual impact? Is it like eroding the sand beds? Is it eroding the sandbars? Is it destroying the ecology of that the coast? I mean, what exactly is happening? Because I'm trying to understand. Like all the people who are listening, they're like, okay, so I'm just going to enjoy myself over there. How is what I'm doing harming the coast?
See, Goa came out with something called the Beach Act policy, which was quite a good policy, to be very honest, in comparison to what other states have. In the CRZ 2011, Goa was given a special permission to erect beach shacks within 10 meters of the high tide line. So, under the CRZ, you can't have any. It's a non-development zone, so you can't have any permanent structures, even temporary structures that are for private use within 500 meters of the high tide line. This was not brought to, sort of regulate who can use what portion of the coast. It came purely from a disaster management perspective
Oh,
that the coast is rough and 500 meters is that buffer zone that sort of protects your infrastructure, your property. And it just makes sense to let that area be as wild as possible so that it acts
okay.
as a natural buffer to these
Oh,
communities, to these regions. A lot
okay.
of people don't know that because they look at the coast as, just a piece of land. And the coast is not a piece of land. It is part of the sea. It is just something that you can tangibly see out of water. And the other portion is obviously inside water. So, in terms of the violations that we've seen in Goa, this comes from the idea that we've got the 10 meter to set up temporary structures under the Beach Act policy, which is very strict of saying that no concrete is supposed to be used. You're supposed to use thatched roofs made of bamboo leaves, have shacks completely which are movable and have to be demolished after the season is over. So the moment, anybody listening to this podcast, if you are going to the beach, you all can actually do this experiment. You all can just find a stone around, when you're at the beach near the water, just place the stone on the water, and when the waves are hitting, you will see the sides of the stones eroded almost immediately.
Oh,
Right? So when the
okay.
waves come and hit the water, even like when your feet are on the water, when you're just going to dip your legs in the water, you're on the shore of it, you can see the entire region around your feet like submerged, and like that entire space has become of like it's with less sand,
Right.
right?
So
And the water is going around it.
that's not a good sign. So basically, if you're taking your photogenic Instagram photographs, right, and
That's a
then you
great
see,
experiment to understand erosion.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you keep you just wait for the waves to come, and then if your feet are kind of submerging in and there's less sand, more rubble, I'm guessing, then that's not a good sign, right, for the coast.
Yeah. So that's what it's going to do to these structures. A, the structures are not climate resilient or climate sustainable. B, the one portion of the beach starts getting eroded. Like, the beach starts getting lesser. So say if your beach is about in width, say it's 1 kilometer in width, you have instant erosion of at least 10 to 50 meters. 3 to 6 months after these structures have come up, and depending on the size of the structure, maybe even faster. So if
Right.
you have no more sandy beaches left on your coast, the entire region floods with the minimal rainfall or little bit of tidal surge that comes during monsoon from the sea.
Right. So, what do you think, tour companies can do to protect the environment and at the same time run their businesses? Should they like not do certain things or should they do certain things? I know there might be not such an easy answer to this, but what do you think?
I think, defining anything in terms of ethical business, especially ethical tourism business, is quite a complex subject. But, I think I always suggest the guiding principles, which is if it's harming the coast and you know that it's harming the coast, or if they're doing activities that do not pertain to, the cultural tourism that Goa actually portrays in terms of its culture, then those are avenues or those are options that you may not explore.
Wow, so that's an interesting way of doing tourism. That's nice. And I think that brings me to the next topic, which is slow traveling, and turtles also travel slow. Weird segue. But yeah, so turtles. In my book, I have a short story, okay, which is based on the turtles, and it's the story is called Ridley's Beach Shack, and it's about a love story between a girl who loves the olive Ridley sea turtle and a boy who owns a beach shack. So that's my personal kind of story into the whole turtle thing. And I also remember going to Morjim and looking for these nesting grounds. And again, when I read about it, it's such an amazing thing about nature that they do something called synchronized nesting, right? Which is that all the female turtles come and lay their eggs on the same beach decades later, right? I mean, it's like they have a GPS in their heads. And this whole thing is called aribadas, this whole synchronized nesting thing, right? Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about it? I mean,
Sure, sure. So aribara is actually, a term that translates into mass nesting, and mass nesting happens only in two locations in the world, which is Puri in the Gahirmata Sanctuary in Odisha,
right.
and Costa Rica. Mexico also has some of the, sightings in terms of aribara, but these two locations are the main zones where you see aribara every year. A very stable population of 3,000 sea turtles coming, each season to these beaches with more than 3 lakh eggs laid each nesting season. And it's only done by one species called the olive ridley sea turtle.
Okay, so what are the sea turtles that land at Morjim? Are they olive ridley, or and I'm guessing from what you're telling me is that they don't do the mass synchronized nesting at Morjim. These are solo nesting grounds. Is that correct?
These are basically much more solitary nesting grounds and much more spread out, and so they are not mass nesting; they are sporadic nests. But they are very important because the sporadic nesting sea turtles will not go to the mass nesting zone. They will only come to these zones, and most of the sea turtle beaches in the world have sporadic nestings. Just a preference probably.
Okay, and what is the other most interesting thing that you've learned about sea turtles?
Oh, the journey back home. So say statistically, if 1,000 eggs of sea turtles, are in a nest, one sea turtle obviously can lay only up to 100 or 150 eggs. And say you have 10 nests. So out of 1,000 sea turtle eggs,
right,
75% of them hatch, reach the sea if there are low human or wildlife predators. And the entire process from the egg to the sea and then growing up into an adult, given now the plastic pollution, factors, only one sea turtle has a probability of surviving to adulthood.
Oh, okay. Now I got to ask you a very odd question. Okay. I have to confess, I love seafood. So now I'm just wondering, I'm genuinely curious with all your, work, and you working so closely with sea and sea turtles. Has it changed your eating habits? Do you eat seafood? What is it? I mean, you are Goan after all. So how did all of this impact you? Yeah.
I do eat seafood, and so there's a lot of documentaries and films on what seafood does to sea turtles and other marine wildlife. And some of the data is fair because a lot of seafood caught in today's world is from trawling and pursening, which is very huge boats and huge nets in the middle of the sea catching enormous amounts of fish for consumption. So when you have such huge nets, you also get a lot of bycatch. Bycatch is basically, wildlife, marine wildlife like dolphins, sea turtles, and stingrays, manta rays, etc., that you don't intend on catching, but getting caught in your net. And so it takes a lot of time for them to pull up the net. So these guys are stuck there, and sea turtles have to come up to breathe because they are reptiles. So they have lungs. They don't have gills that they can breathe underwater. So they are stuck in a net and they don't get to breathe after 70 to 1 hour, they will pretty much drown and die in those nets. And that's how a lot of sea turtles get caught in bycatch, also get caught in ghost gear from these vessels, and which is discarded fishing nets, and get stuck and with flipper cuts and everything. Turtles we've rescued, in these situations, in Goa itself too. So yes, the fishing sector does have activities that contribute to this, but there's also another sector known as, the small scale, more sustainable fisheries sector, which is a lot of what Goa has, in terms of our local markets and our local fishing vendors. And
which is basically community fishing and not using these big trawlers and all of that, right?
Yes.
So that's the most sustainable way of going about, for fisher folks to earn their livelihood, and of course for us to have yummy seafood.
And it also directly contributes to sea turtle conservation, because if there's a turtle stuck in a net, they are the first ones to take it in their boat and get it, to the center. Or if they see something happening in sea, like, there's an oil spill happening and it's the nesting season, or some illegal activity happening, they are the first to report it. So they are our partners in conservation, and the fisherwomen are such strong advocates for the CRZ, for the Wildlife Protection Act, for the conservation of marine wildlife. They are the ones who go to these ministries and talk about getting these things, because they've seen the wildlife more than any of us.
Yeah. Now, like you told me that the whole turtle nesting period also coincides with tourist season, right? And you have mentioned that some people try and ask you how can they kind of see these nesting grounds? What's the most sustainable way to do it? How can they kind of, visit the nesting grounds and at the same time ensure that it's done in a safe and sustainable way?
So I have a very weird way of starting, this to answer this question.
Lovely.
We have a meme page actually, based on all the questions that tourists have asked us in terms of what can they do to see turtles, because there's so much of confusion firstly with what a sea turtle is and what a tortoise or a freshwater turtle is.
Right.
And we've got a lot of questions, and a lot of excited comments from lovely tourists.
So what's the meme page called? What is the meme page called?
It's called Sea Turtle Mothers Club. It's basically like a sarcasm inspired page of what sea turtles may be thinking from what people talk about them in order to see them. And a lot of questions is, can we just see a turtle? When do they come? How do we see them? And it's very difficult to make them understand that they are wildlife. We really have no control over when she wants to come and nest, because we've tried patrolling the beaches and we've never been successful in spotting a turtle right from the time she's come to the time she's gone.
Right. All right. So now we come to our next round. It's our Susegad secret segment. So I want you to tell our audience, what is your Susegad secret? What puts you in your Susegad's place?
Many things. I am a Goan after all, so we don't have one Susegad secret. But I think it would be, the onset of the monsoons. When the day is completely dull, and you really can't do any work because there's no electricity at most times when the rains are happening, and you just sit with a cup of tea in your veranda and just look at coconut trees flying helter-skelter. I think that's my Susegad moment.
Wow, beautiful. And it's perfect because the monsoons are coming up, and I'm sure that when this podcast is up, it's going to be raining like crazy in Goa, and people should visit it at that time. And that's a nice Susegad secret. Okay, so Sarita, now my next question, which I ask all my guests, and I enjoy asking it because I get some interesting answers. So the question to you is, what is the meaning of love to you?
Okay, so, it's basically doing something, I suppose, without the intention of getting something back. And I know I give a lot of analogies with regard to sea turtles, but it's pretty much, what we see with regard to how the mother turtles do find the most suitable space for nesting, and keep the babies, keep the eggs in there, and then go back to the sea without knowing that which of them will survive or not. And I think a lot of Goans, have that in our heritage, where our ancestors, our grandparents have done it to the best of their ability to keep the space as wild and as sustainable for the next generation who's coming after that. And whatever we see today, and whatever, the paradise as we call it of Goa, is come from these choices of, I think, of love. I think I could
Right.
define just that as love.
Yeah, I guess so. To paraphrase what you're saying, basically, love is giving without any expectations in return.
Yeah, giving your best
Nice.
without any expectation in return.
Very cool. Okay, now to my next segment, which is the rapid fire or the Uzo
Wow.
round. So basically, there'll be these quick questions and you have to give like one word answers. All right? So you set? You ready?
Okay.
Okay. What's your favorite type of turtle and why?
It's the leatherback sea turtle. Because it's one of the biggest sea turtles, so it occupies a lot of space. And I don't know, it's just the biggest sea turtle, so I
Nice.
I love it. So that's the
Cool.
answer.
Okay. What's your favorite beach outside of Goa?
Oh, it's Mahabalipuram in Chennai. That's in Tamil Nadu. That's my favorite beach outside of Goa.
Okay. Now, another fun question. If you were stuck on an island by yourself for like a year, okay, what 2 things would you take with you?
I would definitely take my phone and a koita to cut coconuts and other things that would probably help me on that island. Yeah, grandmom secrets.
Only 2 things. So phone, and koita. That's it.
Yes, phone and koita.
Cool.
Then
Nice,
it's just
interesting.
me to myself.
And hopefully there'll be electricity on the island.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can at least use the phone for other fun things like photography or
Right.
something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Where can people go up to read more about Goa's seas and turtles?
Oh yeah, you can just follow us on Instagram, Sea Turtle Mothers Club. And we also have the Morjim Sea Turtle Trust page on Instagram, which you can follow and get a lot of information. And just visit us in our office. We have a nice library set up.
Okay. All right. One sustainability habit that everyone should adopt.
I think ask the shopkeeper wherever you go, whether you want that plastic bag or not. And sort of whenever he's giving it to you, just like, I think I don't want it. So just that awareness whether you want something that's just been given to you that could reduce a lot of plastic. That's been super helpful for me. And just say no. Just be like, I can put it in the bike or the car. And you just reduce that automatically without doing anything.
That's simple enough and it's nice. Okay, that does it for our Uzo round. But now my last question, because and it's a really fun question, because what I think is that the best way to fall in love with a place or with the culture is to learn its language, to learn its mother tongue, right? So can you share with our audience one of your favorite Konkani phrase or word and give us an example of it?
I think there was this word called Kaljawanth, which translated to a strong-hearted person. It was after my grandmom had just survived an angioplasty and we wanted to celebrate.
Wow.
So we were asking what we could put on the cake, and somebody said, let's call her the Kaljawanth of the family. And I don't know under which north, south, Bardes or the Salset dialect it comes under. I'm very confused, to be very honest on that, since I was educated in Bombay and lived in Goa, during breaks of my education.
Yeah.
But I think Kaljawanth is one of my favorite Konkani words, and I really relate to it.
So how would you pronounce it again? Kaljawanth?
Kaljawanth. Kaljevont.
Okay, wow. I have to say that this is the first time I'm coming across it. And it means, you said like brave heart? Is that what?
A strong-hearted person. Like a person
Okay.
with a very strong heart.
Nice. Okay, wow. Okay, that's great. So I think, Sarita, you probably take after your grandma. You're a Kaljawanth.
Thank you.
With everything
Wow.
that you're doing. Yeah. And so thank you for coming on to the Susegad Stories from Goa podcast. I think it was awesome for all of us to understand so much more about the oceans, the turtles, and everybody who visits Goa can kind of look at it through these, this lens that you have showed us. And I always end the podcast by saying, the very famous Konkani term, Mo Gasoni, right? So thank you for coming on to the podcast, Sarita, and Mo Gasoni.
Moga naso tumka. Bye.
Okay, I hope this episode on oceans and turtles was great for you. It was enlightening for me, and we try and bring you different guests and topics on Susegad Stories from Goa podcast. And obviously, the ocean is something that we must all care about. And Sarita Fernandes has shown us how to do that by leading the way. If you've got suggestions on new topics, then do DM us on our Instagram and let us know. Thank you, and Mo Gasuni. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Susegad Stories from Goa. Do subscribe if you're a new listener and join a community of people who love and live the Goan lifestyle. Again, I'm Clyde D'Souza, and for more Goan content, you can follow me on Instagram at Clyde D'Souza Author. This podcast is brought to you by Bound, a company that helps you grow through stories. Follow them at Bound India on all social platforms for updates on this podcast, or take a look at their other podcasts. Moga Suni, and see you soon.